Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the AgView Pitch. We are going to have an interesting conversation to hear around biologicals, and this is going to be a learning opportunity. So I highly recommend you stay tuned for this whole conversation. We're lucky enough to have with us today Dan Uppena, who is good. I consider a good friend of mine, and also a working partner over the years with Corteva. And Dan is the U.S. sales leader for Corteva Biologicals. Dan, how's it going?
Going excellent. Looking forward to a little time for holidays, but as you know, the crazy busy time trying to get everything done before the end of the year.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I'm excited to have this conversation for a couple of reasons. Number one, unfortunately, as we record this, we're in. I feel like it's an economic massive economic challenge right now for farmers. We're seeing low commodity prices. We're seeing really tight margins. We're seeing, profit losses and some things like that. And that's the bad side of it. But the good side of it is there's a lot of things that are in our control that we can actually grab a hold of and use certain tools and grab certain levers. And we just got to make sure we pull the right levers and do some of the right things. And one of the things today I want to talk to you about is biologicals, and the reason for that is perspective out there, or a lot of thoughts and ideas of, is it the right thing to do, is it not the right thing to do, why should we be doing that, and where can we be cutting costs. And it's one of the areas where I think sometimes people would look at that area as, well, that's an area where I'm going to cut costs. And on the other side of the equation, one of the things I always say is, the most important way to consider to lower your cost of production is to increase yield. This is one of the things that, in talking to you, and that's why I'm excited to have this conversation today, is just some of the things that I think we can do to enhance yield, protect yield, and look at what some of the things are that Corteva is doing, and why Corteva is in this business now is kind of what I want to get to with you today. So the first question I want to ask you is, explain to me and the audience here Corteva Biologicals, and what's that mean? What's Talk a little bit about, initially here.
What does it all mean? So biological, super broad term, right?
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, anytime I've talked to a grower about this, I've been in 31 years, not this job, but in the industry. I always look at things, if it were my dad, it were my brother-in-law, my family. Everybody's had the experience of combining field, looking at that yield monitor, and you see that thing vary, right? In any field. Sometimes it's a tight variance, sometimes it can be 40, 50 bushels. And a lot of times you can explain what happened, right? It's easy to explain drainage differences, maybe some stand differences, things like that. But just as often, it's not obvious. We start to think about, okay, what was different about this spot that was soiled for the field, and this other spot that was, near the top, or it rang the bell at 300 on the yield monitor. So as students of agronomy, we've always been taught sort of the chemical and physical properties of the soil, the basics of fertility, pH, cation exchange capacity, you name it, all those sort of classically trained things. But there's this whole realm of microbiology in the soil. One of my very favorite smells is when you first till the soil in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
That has a smell to it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, everybody listening to this podcast, if they've had variants, they can just put themselves and they can smell that aroma, right? Or if you're like me and you're from Wisconsin, it might be a little slightly different smell that you're thinking of. But anyway, the reason you can smell it is because it's alive, right? And so the third realm of kind of soil characteristics or properties is this whole realm of soil microbiology, yield equation, genetics by management by environment. We've historically made incredible advances in genetics and management. The third leg of the stool here is this whole environmental piece in soil microbiology. And so if we can figure out how to add to that soil health and vibrance, I think we can unlock frontier in yields.
Talk a little bit about, why did Corteva get in this space in the first place, and what's different?
Probably the best way for I think about it, or the best way I've explained it when somebody asks me, like even outside our industry, like, hey, what's this biological space about? Let's look at David Hula and Alex Harrell, current corn and soybean world record holders. Okay, in their contest fields, what did they do better than anybody else? If we agree that yield potential is the highest when it's in the bag, once we take it out of the bag, we expose it to stress. So what have they done? They've done the best job of limiting the number of yield loss days or bad days that their crop has throughout the season, right? Now, they're doing that at a smaller sort of contest field scale, but they're also learning to use some advanced management tools to apply to their larger feed field scale. All of our biological products are designed to help the plant weather the storm when stress occurs.
So there's a, I don't know how many biological products on the market. There's tons. And what's different with your products or with the products that Corteva has versus, other stuff in the industry?
What really differentiates Corteva is a few things. The first thing is we can explain how our products work. And that seems like a kind of a trivial thing, but it's actually a big thing when you think about, how much interaction occurs in the environment, and do you have a known mode of action? And then that leads to the second thing, which is EPA registrations. In order to have an EPA registration, you have to have data to back up what you're claiming that these products will do. The products we sell have EPA registrations. The third piece is what we call stable formulations. So formulations that have a extended shelf life, ones that are formulated with glycol type formulations where they're very stable. And then the last piece is how much testing and research has gone on it. If I'm sitting next to a grower and inevitably they would ask the question, hey, what do you got? And does this stuff actually work? Right? We've got 90 pages of research data that we can walk through with a grower, replicated research trials that kind of prove that, hey, there's something here with these products in terms of how we use them.
Interesting. So talk a little bit about the products and I mean, what are some of the specific things that you guys are offering that, that the producer might want to consider or think about or look at?
So the three growth hormones in crops that we deal with, auxins, cytokinin, and gibberellin. Those are the three primary growth hormones. And having those growth hormones in the right ratio at the right time is really the key at any given time for your plant to feel healthy and continue to focus on growth versus survival. The two stress hormones are called ethylene and abscisic acid. We need ethylene and abscisic acid kind of at the finish line in finishing our crop. But during the growth season, we want to make sure that we kind of hold those at bay and keep the growth hormones in charge. The core of our product lineup is supplemental doses of those three growth hormones, auxins, cytokinin, gibberellic acid. So we have a number of products that are formulated to provide supplemental doses of those growth hormones so that we can pre-stress condition the crop at key yield determining stages. So we can go along for the ride with the planter application. We can go along for the ride with the post-herbicide application, and we can go along for the ride with the fungicide application.
Give me an example of that. I think, I was talking to you, I don't know, last summer or something, and one of the things you mentioned that I really thought was interesting is, how like in a sandy area of the field or a lighter area of the field or lack of rain and that plant starts to decide we're going to start shutting down. Give that explanation. I thought that was really good.
Every number of key environments throughout their farm. You've got fields and farms that are highly productive, well drained. You've got others not so much, different soil types, as you mentioned. At any given time, think of this tug of war that's happening on any given day. You want the growth hormones to be winning the tug of war. You want them to be pulling on the rope. When they're pulling on the rope, especially during the grand growth stages within corn and soybeans, things are going well. The photosynthetic factory is doing what it should. You're packing starch and sugars into that producing seed. Unfortunately, there's days when the stress hormones start to pull on that rope. And when the stress hormones pull on that rope, basically growth shuts down. plant instead says, I'm going to hunker down and just focus on survival today versus putting everything I can into that reproductive side of the plant. So I think the day we were talking about it is, we were off to a slow start. Obviously, we had, some wet conditions like any other spring. We have cool conditions. Just the fact that we can add in that early post window, we can add some supplemental doses of cytokinin and auxins to really jumpstart and prepare that plant for that grand growth stage just makes a lot of sense. And we've seen some pretty tremendous yield responses from doing that.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty awesome. And then just again for clarification, so there's essentially three product applications, and I like how you said that, going along for the ride with the planter, going along for the herbicide application, and then riding along for the fungicide application. Is there any antagonisms or any concerns or issues in that respect that a person needs to be aware of? Not everybody
Yeah,
likes the easy button, but on the same token, you want it to be practical as it fits into, a system. And can you do, and the last part of the question is, can you do one and not another? Can you do the one that goes along with the planter, or the one that goes along with the herbicide and not do others or something?
all of these products are extremely safe. They're well tested. They can tank mix with virtually everything. Wide window of application, basically can use them at any given timing within the crop. We marry up with when those passes are happening across the field any. And then, even things like rain fast, these things can bind to a receptor within minutes. So very rain fast and send the right message.
Interesting. So this is something that I'm going to have an opinion on, but I want to ask you first. And so, how do you justify the cost? I started out the conversation around the idea that margins are tight, and I want to hear your 2 cents, and I'll throw mine in there, but I want to hear, from the company perspective, how do you justify the expense?
I've worked with you long enough to know that on any given day, you can tell me exactly what the crop budget is
Yeah.
for either corn or soybeans, right? And it's a great question. I kind of start with just a little anecdote. So, growing up in Wisconsin and being around cows most of my formative years, we always had a little bit of a joke when milk prices are low, which they commonly were. You add cows, or it seemed like my dad added cows. And then when milk prices are high, we added cow. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason behind that, right, is there's in running a dairy, and that's one of the levers that you can pull, right? More production. And so I don't think it's a whole lot different when we look at crops. What can I do to add bushels? This is new ideas. When soybean seed treatments were first introduced, right? Lots of skepticism, but now it's pretty common that people use that as part of their program. Corn fungicides, when those were first introduced, we had to figure out exactly how to optimize their use, but a lot of farmers would consider that as an essential production tool at this point. I think we're just at the forefront of figuring out how to use these biologicals. What's unique about us, and I think what we can bring to the table, is we have the people and the expertise to test these things over a large number of acres. We get a couple of years under our belt with these products. I think we're going to do what we've always done, and that is figure out how to use them in the best possible way for the biggest possible benefit. It pays growers to always be on the lookout for innovative ideas that can add bushels. What our focus is how do we make it repeatable and make that ROI consistent? Because I think we've had lots of experiences where they'll try some of these things for a year, they'll see a response in a field or in a given year, and then they go back and try to do that again and they have different results. We're going to do a tremendous amount of research across wide field scale testing. I'm talking thousands of trials so that we can not only recommend these products to growers, but recommend here's where they work the best for the most repeatable ROI. And here's some things we learn about where maybe they don't fit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that scale and that testing and the ability to add that sort of advice, I think it's really going to differentiate how we go about this versus, hey, it's great, just use it everywhere.
Mm-hmm. I like that idea of it's going to be, you're testing that over a very large, massive area. And so the consistency of the data gets better the more of it you do. And so I think that's a really key thing. I have another question too, or as we get to wrapping up here, but sort of a final question is, so growers are listening to this, and I want to follow up with you and do get some more information on this at another time on just some different things. But producers want to talk to somebody, like who do they go to? Who do they talk to? And where's the best place to get the information on some of these products and to start doing some research? At the very least, I think people need to investigate this, because I think the opportunities and some of the stuff you guys are bringing to the table is the reason why I had you come on here on the AgView pitch, is because I think there's really something here that I think people need to be thinking about. But what's the best way for individuals to go out and get a hold of somebody and start looking at some possibilities in their own operation?
We have an exclusive brand for the Pioneer seed channel. It's called Nexta. If you want to learn more about Nexta products, which is kind of the core of the lineup that I briefly alluded to today, get in touch with your local Pioneer representative. And then we'll also be selling these through a different brand through some select retailers as well. I would get started by just reaching out to your local Pioneer representative, and they can at least get you started with some information. Yes, we've got all kinds of specifics around the actual products and what they do, how to use them, and how you would benefit from using them. But really today, just wanted to give you the bird's eye view.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think this is a great introduction, and I'm with you 100%. I think the products, the how-tos, the what to expect, the things to consider, how to be a part of that big research bucket. I think sometimes, when we're testing a few things and learning, I think that those are the opportunities to really grow our business and to learn some things, and sometimes being on the front end of that when it looks very bleak, those are the opportunities usually to capitalize on some key learnings that actually ends up improving the bottom line. So with that said, I'm going to give you the last word, and then I'm going to follow up with you if you're okay with that, even if we got to throw some bits and pieces into some of the podcasts as we go. We may do that, but I'm going to give you the last word.
Our little catchphrase here is stress less, yield more. So really, that's what it's all about. You're going to your corn crop's going to encounter stress. Our ability, or your soybean crop, our ability to limit the impact of those stressful days is what unlocks the yield advantages of using biologicals. And if we do it right and we put the science behind it, we can make it repeatable. We can give growers solid advice on where these products fit and where they don't. We're in it for the long haul. Like everything we do, we've got an obligation to kind and service what we sell. So we don't have all the answers, but my experience, 30 years working with innovative growers, if we put our heads together and do the work, we can typically figure out how to make things and ultimately give you an opportunity to kind of yield your way out of a crop budget that's a little tougher this year. Really, let's start a conversation, talk about how Nexta products can help.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. You look at what the USDA thought where the yields was going to shake out, and it was wet, or it was too dry, or too cold, or too hot, or it's always too something. And we still seem to produce an amazing amount, and it's because of the innovation and the things we're doing. And I think we got to keep that up. And this is another one of those levers that's being added to the equation. And I think we gotta pay attention because we want to be a part of it when it's happening. So, all right. With that said, Dan, thank you. Thanks everybody for listening. Again, if you got other topics, things you want us to be hitting on, more information you'd like, please send us emails and let us know. With that said, thanks again. We'll catch you next time on the AgView Pitch.